In ancient Egypt, a revolution is brewing. The most ambitious building project on the planet sets off a chain of events that will transform the country.
This would have been an epoch-changing event.
Buried in the sands of Egypt is a tale of a powerful pharaoh who would become a god and revolutionize Egypt. The legend of the world's first pyramid. The story of the pyramids is one of innovation,
It was a resurrection machine.
mysterious rituals,
These are things that help the deceased re-energize and live for eternity.
back-breaking work, and palace intrigue. Unlock the deepest secrets of the pharaohs.
Every mummy is different. You never know exactly what to expect.
Explore the lives of ancient workers and uncover the remarkable story of Egypt's old kingdom.
Not only did ancient Egypt make the pyramids made ancient Egypt.
Egypt's pyramid building age. 500 years of history, during which builders constructed some of the world's most iconic monuments, including the Great Pyramid of Giza, the only wonder of the ancient world still standing. To understand how the Pyramid Age began and how it transformed the country, we need to travel some 4,700 years back in time. To the city of Memphis and the palace of a powerful king. His people call him Netjereket, meaning divine of body. But today, we know this pharaoh as Djoser. He rules a country of more than 1 million people. As pharaoh, his first priority is maintaining control of his kingdom and strengthening his dynasty. Djoser was born into a life of privilege around 2620 BC. It was common for a pharaoh to have multiple wives. But Djoser was probably married to just one woman, Hetepherenepti, his half-sister.
Normal people did not have incestual relationships with their brothers and sisters in ancient Egypt. That wasn't a common thing to do.
By marrying his sister, Djoser ensures that only his own blood will have a claim to the throne.
It's really a desire to keep power within the family.
Djoser's incestuous marriage reinforces the immense power that he now enjoys.
The pharaoh in ancient Egypt is everything. Commander-in-chief, high priest, in charge of making all the laws and decrees. So the most important person, obviously, in the land.
And like other kings before him, he claims to rule alongside the gods, working together to keep order and unity in Egypt.
From the very origins of ancient Egyptian kingship, the king is a mediator between humans and the gods. And that seems to be something fundamental to ancient Egypt.
The king was responsible for keeping the gods happy. And if the gods were happy, then the people would be fed, and the kingdom would continue to go on in a world of order.
But a devastating catastrophe is about to put Djoser's authority to the ultimate test. Clues to the disaster lie 400 miles south of the ancient capital of Memphis, in a region called Elephantine. In the eyes of ancient Egyptians, this is the source of the River Nile. Egyptologist Jean-Pierre Patznik is a specialist in deciphering long-lost languages. Today, he's investigating a stone plaque known as a stela.
There it is. The famine stela. This is an absolutely unique document because it tells a story that would have happened during the reign of Djoser.
The words engraved on this rock tell a story of death and disaster. The Nile is the lifeblood of Egypt, flowing from the south towards the north. Every year, between June and September, flood waters carried fertile silt and water towards farms in the north where most people lived. But in the 18th year of Djoser's reign, the floods fail.
The stela tells us an absolutely amazing story. A famine that would have lasted 7 years. 7 years of poverty, 7 years during which the Nile failed to water the crops. For a pharaoh, there's nothing worse. And naturally, Djoser tries to figure out what is happening. Why don't the waters of the Nile arrive? What's going on? Why is there no flood?
This stela was carved over 2,000 years after the event. So for years, the story of the famine was dismissed as legend. But the Nile has many secrets. And in Washington, D.C., researchers at the U.S. Geological Institute have found evidence that could support the famine stela myth. Christopher Bernhardt is a pollen specialist. He has analyzed dirt containing pollen grains that settled on the banks of the Nile during the pyramid building age, 4,500 years ago.
Pollen is really cool. It's such a powerful tool. So it's not just this thing that every spring season makes you sneeze, right? It provides so much information as it gets deposited.
These are core samples from the Nile Delta, cylinders of earth bored out of the river's soil. These cores are like time machines. They allow scientists to peer back thousands of years, revealing the secrets of the Nile.
If we take a core and go through time, looking at the pollen, it can give you information about regional climate. It can tell you about sea level change. You can reconstruct past environments. We don't have the resolution in our records to get to see how variation happened from year to year or even decade to decade. But there were actually some episodic droughts during the time of pyramid building. Our record shows that's definitely within the realm of possibility.
The famine stela describes how 7 years of drought and poor floods bring chaos to Djoser's kingdom. Desperate to survive, brother turns on brother. Law and order break down. Egypt is on the brink of civil war. Djoser asks his priests for guidance. But they don't know what to do. He's feeling the pressure. Previous kings have been overthrown in the turmoil of famine.
If the gods were unhappy with the king, there would be retribution. So there was a direct cause and effect relationship between the king doing his job properly and the people being able to survive.
So the king would certainly be aware of what would result from mismanaging such a situation.
Djoser summons his most trusted advisor, a man called Imhotep.
He's asking his vizier Imhotep to find out why the flood is not coming.
The kingdom and both their lives may be at stake. Imhotep travels to the supposed source of the Nile at Elephantine Island to investigate. Here, legend has it that Imhotep bathes himself in the water of the Nile and then falls asleep on the bank. In his dream, Imhotep is visited by a god called Khnum.
He found out that the god who is controlling the Nile, god Khnum, is unhappy because he's not receiving the sufficient offering that he should receive.
Imhotep wakes, convinced he has found the answer.
If we're nice to Khnum, Khnum will be nice, and good inundations, good floods will come back.
Imhotep reports his vision to the king, and Djoser gives the order to repair and reinstate a temple for Khnum that had long been abandoned.
Ici, nous avons donc Djoser,
This is Djoser, with the crown of Upper and Lower Egypt.
qui fait une offrande.
He is making an offering to 3 deities, including an important one, Khnum, the god of the source of the Nile.
The famine stela says that Djoser's intervention saves the day. Khnum allows the Nile floods to return. One way or another, the famine ends, and during Djoser's reign, there's an extraordinary change in the way that ordinary people view the king.
Really, with Djoser, we see probably a more powerful form of the king. The idea not just that the king is an intercessor, but that the king is a type of god on earth, probably in a way that it hadn't been expressed before.
Djoser may be part god, but he still must prepare for his own death. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh Djoser wants to become immortal. So he turns to the wise Imhotep for help.
Imhotep is one of the most important characters in ancient Egypt. He was a physician, he was an architect.
Most of what we know about Imhotep during the reign of Djoser, whom he seems to have served as vizier, is name and titles on a statue base.
In order for him to have his titles inscribed on a statue base of Djoser, he must have been a very, very high official.
Djoser decides to entrust Imhotep with the care of his immortal soul. He commands Imhotep to build a tomb worthy of a god, a landmark that will survive for eternity.
We call tombs houses of the dead sometimes, but I would say the Egyptians don't think of them quite so much that way. They are machines to help propel the deceased from this world into the next and to ensure a meaningful afterlife.
This was one of their primary prerogatives in their lives, was to make sure that they would survive death so they could live on for eternity.
Traditionally, Egyptians simply buried their dead in the sand. The desert would naturally preserve the bodies, which came to be an essential part of their religion.
They thought by mummifying the body, keeping the body, it will be very important for the afterlife. This afterlife was everything to the Egyptians, not only to the kings, but also to the individuals. Those people were somehow looking for immortality, looking for their afterlife, and looking to be living again and having a second life.
But sandstorms would devastate grave sites and scatter the remains, jeopardizing survival in the afterlife. So long before Djoser, the Egyptians had abandoned the sand and begun to protect their pharaohs' bodies underneath tombs made of mud bricks called mastabas.
Mastabas, the Arabic word for bench. They look like big bench tombs.
So there is a below surface structure, which is a shaft, and a small room that keeps the sarcophagus and the body and the mummy underground. And then above it, they had a place for leaving offerings for the deceased.
For the tomb of Djoser, Imhotep starts by thinking big. First, he imagines the largest and most imposing brick mastaba ever built. But then he has a revolutionary idea. Instead of mud brick, he'll use stone.
He changes history somewhat. If the Egyptians continued to build all of their major structures in mud brick, we would know far less about them today. Because mud brick, when it rains, it disappears.
Imhotep and Djoser used stone because what they wanted was to build for eternity.
It may sound like an obvious choice, but in the time before the wheel, executing it would be one of the greatest challenges in human history. Imhotep's first task is to select a location for Djoser's mastaba tomb. He needs a solid building platform and space.
Nah.
He settles on the Saqqara Plateau, a rocky escarpment on the west bank of the Nile.
Saqqara was a great place to build simply because you had very solid bedrock there, and you also had a local stone that you could quarry, so you wouldn't have to go far afield in order to quarry stone that would be needed for structures.
Saqqara is in an elevated position overlooking the capital city of Memphis on the opposite shore of the Nile.
So that meant that anything that was constructed, on this high plateau could be seen by the people below. Plus the fact it was very easy for the king to go and visit his monument as it was under construction because his palace happened to be in Memphis.
Imhotep plans to build a structure so daunting and impressive that future generations would think it could have only been built by aliens. He'll need a strong team and plan to achieve his dream. People to organize the stone quarrying, direct the cutting of building blocks, oversee their transport, and manage the huge workforce that Imhotep will assemble. This trusted group of men will form the elite of the emerging administration. Taking on this construction project will call for the mobilization of the entire country and influence the very future of Egypt.
This would have been an epoch-changing event. This is not just the first time that a major, large, freestanding stone monument is constructed in Egypt, but the amount of labor that would have to be harnessed, the number of people that would have to be housed and fed in order to set it up would have been rather staggering.
The plan will bring revolutionary advances, new engineering techniques, literacy, a national census, and unparalleled organization.
Probably the most important thing is the administrative structure, because the Egyptians are known as bureaucrats, and they took it to new heights.
The success of the project will depend on good communication, so writing will be key.
It's probable that part of the preparation would have been going out and making sure you had enough literate people in the right places.
The scribes are the literate class, trained to write hieroglyphs, but also in the hieratic script, a more common form of hieroglyphs which are highly abbreviated, speeding up the recording of information. The scribes are an essential part of Imhotep and Djoser's gigantic new project. They need to know what resources and which people are available to execute their plan. So they create a census, drawn up by their scribes, to find out.
They started listing people, where they're from, where they live, what's their lineage, whole lists of people. Because of this, they go to look for them in the villages throughout Egypt, people who are going to be ordered to work. If they had digital, they would have created massive databases. A whole country is being mobilized to supply this monument with men, equipment, and provisions. A non-stoppable and relentless logistics network is in place.
Imhotep uses this network to gather a huge workforce from all over Egypt. Now, he needs them to carry out a seemingly impossibly ambitious design. Imhotep gathers thousands of workers at Saqqara to build the pharaoh Djoser's tomb. Just getting them here is a monumental achievement. But now he has to build a monument fit for a king who is also a god. Imhotep's plan is to carve a vertical shaft 92 feet into the bedrock. His team will put the king's sarcophagus coffin at the base of this shaft, and then build the massive stone mastaba over the top.
He was following what had been done previously, where the kings were buried underground.
When the underground burial chamber is complete, Imhotep turns his attention to the stone monument above. Stone is not an entirely unknown building material for the Egyptians. For more than a century, craftsmen have been carving stone vases for use in temples.
Ancient Egyptians were already experienced in using the stones, manufacturing of the stones. They were making stone vessels, they were making also small pieces, and even we have some sculptures made of limestone and different stones.
But now, for the first time in the world, Imhotep would need to turn stonemasonry into an industry. The first challenge, getting the huge stones out of the ground and to the site. Today, their quarry is filled with sand, but part of it once encircled Djoser's tomb like a giant overlapping moat over a mile long on each side. The snaking quarry cleverly reduces the distance they have to haul the stone. In the Cairo Museum, Egyptologist Salima Ikram is investigating ancient technology.
This is one of my favorite cases in the Egyptian Museum because it has all of the tools that the Egyptians used. So some are very basic, where you have, even now, people use the plumb bob to see if things are straight. Over here we have measurement tools, where you have pieces of wood linked by rope and that it's marked in a particular way, so you can say it's a cubit, which is basically this long. We have chisels, just like you have them today.
Ancient quarry workers used copper chisels and saws to cut their blocks into shapes suitable for building with. It's estimated that some 140,000 pounds of copper were needed for the construction of Djoser's tomb.
No wonder people say, the pyramids are made by aliens or people from outer space, because nowadays in the world of technology that we live in, it's very hard to imagine that such basic, simple tools could achieve such great and beautiful stuff.
So who were the workers who toiled to build this giant and unique tomb for the pharaoh Djoser?
They really came from everywhere around Egypt. So this project was one that was national.
We know that during the Nile flood, when it was impossible for farmers to work, some of those people would have provided an excellent base of workmen.
It's estimated that for the building, it was roughly 1% of the Egyptian population, close to about 5,000 to 10,000 people, working over a period of time.
People were conscripted to build the pyramids. So yes, someone living in a village 400 miles south probably didn't have much of a choice when the administrators came by and said, for the next season, we need you.
The Egyptians don't use money, so the pyramid builders are paid with goods, bread and beer in particular.
Beer for ancient Egyptians was something very important because it represented for them a kind of food, because beer was made of bread. It was not the same beer that we have today. It was thicker, maybe whiter, so it was somehow a kind of food for ancient Egyptians.
Ancient Egyptian homebrew has a hidden and surprisingly beneficial side effect.
One of the really significant aspects of beer in ancient Egypt is that the fermentation process also decreases the number of microbes in the water.
The fermentation process made it so that you weren't able to get the diseases that were in the Nile naturally. So if you couldn't boil your water, you had to ferment it to be able to drink Nile water.
The workers may get food and drink, but this new industrial-scale quarrying is dangerous work.
Accidents happened, people were injured, arms were broken, legs were broken, stones were falling down, so it was a kind of a dangerous work.
Despite the injuries that workers must have been sustaining, Imhotep is able to keep his project on track. Until finally, 6 years after work had begun, the cut stone mastaba tomb is complete. The monument is colossal. It rises over 25 feet in height, its base stretching over 200 feet in length. But inspecting his completed work, Imhotep isn't satisfied.
Imhotep had really high aspirations. So when Djoser asked him to create a space for the eternal world that's really something like nobody has seen before, I think he takes this to heart.
Imhotep approaches Djoser with an ambitious new idea that will transform the course of history. In ancient Egypt, the architect Imhotep is pitching an innovative new idea to his king, Djoser. The rectangular mastaba tomb that he's built from stone isn't grand enough for God on earth. Imhotep wants to break with tradition and create an entirely new form of tomb that will be visible from miles around. He wants to stack several mastabas one on top of the other, forming a step pyramid.
One of the beauties of the step pyramid is that you can see how Imhotep was thinking through every single one of the stages. They build mastaba on top of mastaba, each one slightly smaller than the rest.
And so we see that Imhotep has this brilliant idea of really creating the first pyramid in permanent material in ancient Egypt.
The question is why? Why did they pick this form? And the idea is that it literally, in hieroglyphs, the step pyramid hieroglyph has to do with ascend. And so it's literally Djoser's stairway to heaven.
Imhotep's plan may seem simple, but stacking each layer flat could cause the monument to collapse under its own weight. So once more, he solves the problem with innovation. Imhotep develops an entirely new construction technique. He will place the stones so they're inclined towards the center of the monument. The arrangement directs forces to the heart of the pyramid, preventing it from collapsing. By carefully distributing the forces, Imhotep ensures that, as the pyramid takes shape, it doesn't collapse under its own weight. When this second phase of the project is complete, the first pyramid in history has taken shape. It's formed from 4 stepped levels. But Imhotep is still not content. Emboldened by the stability of his innovative new building, he gives orders to add 2 more steps to the top. Imhotep must have decided that he has enough time left to complete these new changes before the king dies. After some 19 years of toil, Imhotep's masterpiece is complete. He succeeded in his mission to create a grand and brand new type of tomb out of stone. Something never seen before in the history of mankind. And it's still standing today, almost 4,700 years later. Imhotep's team built a pyramid that stands over 200 feet high, with sides over 330 feet long, said to contain 850,000 tons of limestone blocks. This marvel of engineering still inspires awe today. But incredibly, the step pyramid is only a small part of the work carried out by Imhotep and his team at Saqqara.
So not only do you have 6 layers of this really large structure, but you also have an entire set of other buildings in this mortuary space surrounding the tomb.
There's nothing like Djoser. I mean, the Djoser complex covers 16 hectares, the size of a small town for that period.
Imhotep's team was transforming the style of building in Egypt with innovative stone buildings, but also elaborate new architectural features.
So it wasn't just an explosion of stone building on a gigantic scale. The artistic motifs had such finesse that they impressed and put their stamp on Egyptian architecture for the next 3 millennia.
His pyramid complex required a new kind of professionalism. Craftsmen, architects, basically people who were brought in to create the monument and professionalize the workforce.
Djoser has his monumental tomb, but what happens inside is just as important.
All of these buildings are meant to ensure immortality, and this is where the funeral services and the rituals are held, and the king's cult is perpetuated, ideally forever, for generations.
The king wants to make sure he is worshipped long after death.
You have to think of pyramids as resurrection machines. They were a place that would preserve the king's body. Also, it was a place to celebrate the king's cult, and make no mistake, it was also a way to show the power of the pharaonic state.
If Djoser is to successfully become immortal, he'll need to ensure that his body and soul are looked after for eternity. Egyptians believed that when a pharaoh dies, his soul is divided into 2 parts, the Ba and the Ka.
These 2 elements of the human spirit that live on, the Ba and the Ka, are separate, but they're both necessary to live on into eternity.
The Ba rises to the heavens to join the gods, while the Ka remains in the tomb. They painted their tombs with images of offerings, such as meat and wine, that they believed were essential to feed the Ka soul and keep it alive.
So the whole offering formula at a tomb is just to provide for the sustenance of the deceased.
But the Ka is more than just a prisoner in a temple. On the north side of the complex is the Serdab, a sealed chamber with a small hole in the front.
This is the statue of Djoser, the statue of the royal Ka. It's in the Serdab, an enclosed place devoted to the statue and to the worship of it, because this statue is alive.
The hole isn't to see in. It's so that Djoser's Ka soul can oversee the rituals being held in his honor, ensuring that his legacy lives on.
What's interesting with this statue is that it looks towards the northern sky. That's where you have a group of very special stars.
These northern stars, which the Egyptians call the imperishable ones, are the constellation of Orion and the star Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky.
So by facing the statue towards those stars, they were associating Djoser's spirit with astral bodies that never disappeared from the horizon.
After some 2 decades on the throne and overseeing the construction of the world's first pyramid, Djoser dies around 2560 BC and joins the eternal gods. Priests mummify his body, preserving it so that it remains recognizable to the Ka soul.
Archaeological evidence suggests that Djoser's pyramid was nearly complete upon his death. And that was significant so that the pyramid, the tomb, was ready to receive Djoser's mummy, as well as any of the burial goods that would have accompanied him to the afterlife.
Djoser's carefully prepared body is transported to his grand pyramid, which hides one last secret. At Djoser's step pyramid, Egyptologist Jean-Pierre Patznik has been given special access to investigate mysterious passages hidden underneath.
Oh, wow. This is superb.
Concealed beneath the world's first pyramid is a network of tunnels and chambers stretching nearly 4 miles. The tunnels were built to hide the burial chambers of Djoser's royal family and warehouses packed with offerings.
It goes in all directions. This is amazing.
Imhotep's workers carved these mysterious tunnels through solid bedrock, reaching 145 feet below ground level.
Now, this is incredible.
The pyramid builders carved this central shaft in the open air before building the monument on top, allowing them to lower these massive granite blocks into place to create an immense sarcophagus for the mummy of their pharaoh.
This is over 4,500 years old. It's like a big vault that shuts from above, with a granite cap that seals everything.
Djoser's body no longer lies inside this sarcophagus. It was probably looted by tomb raiders in ancient times. One special passageway, once completely covered in expensive blue tiles, contains a secret.
Wow.
A chance to come face to face with the great pharaoh himself.
Oh là là.
So here we have King Djoser. I'm absolutely amazed to see him like this, because it is such high quality, such great finesse. It's an incredible artwork. The detail of the lines, look at his face. The nostril is so well represented that you can still feel the breath of life. We see a muscular, slender, athletic body. We see a living king, and that's what they wanted to depict.
Djoser has been celebrated in Saqqara for thousands of years. His aim was to be remembered forever, and thanks to the first pyramid in history, it worked.
It's a commemorative monument because in ancient Egypt, a man lives when his name is called. And so this was also a guarantee by Djoser that people would remember him.
But it isn't just King Djoser who will achieve an immortality of sorts. Imhotep, his genius architect, will become worshipped as a god too.
Imhotep actually enjoys a legacy even greater than the king for whom he worked.
The legend of this man's brilliance continues on into the Greek period. So eventually, Imhotep merges with the Greek god of medicine, because his brilliance was just so well known for thousands of years.
With innovative engineering, a massive workforce, and an organized structure to deploy them, Imhotep and Djoser's pyramid plan transforms the country.
I think they know by building the step pyramid, they are building Egypt. They are building the future of Egypt.
There are so many new options for what future kings are going to be able to do. They've really started the pyramid age.
This organizational structure will be key to Egypt's future.
In terms of the organization of the workforce, this is when it all started.
An increasing number of people are employed by the state and are then available and trained for state-sponsored projects.
For the commoner during the reign of Djoser, if they were to look upon this new, exciting step pyramid, would they be able to understand how much life is changing, how much society is changing? They have no idea what's to come.
Soon, new and even more mighty pharaohs will stretch the limits of their power and their imagination. How far will they go? Where will their extraordinary expansion stop?